Hello, welcome back to Checkpoint Reach Podcast. I'm your host Luke Eldon, and I'm joined by my fellow gamers and friends Sud.
Hello, Luke.
Perks.
How's it going?
And Matty.
All right.
How you doing, guys? You all good?
Yeah, good.
Yep.
Good to hear. Good to hear. We're going to be getting into a long article today, so I hope you guys are ready for this.
Already, all right.
Yeah, we're all good, but perhaps those implicated by the article, not so much.
No, they definitely won't be. But before we do get started, remember to subscribe to our channel for more gaming content each week. Give this video a like and comment below as it helps the channel to grow. Anyway, we're here to discuss the latest game news this week, and it's a pretty big one with an article by Jason Schreier that dropped yesterday on Kotaku covering Anthem's shortcomings. And it's a really interesting read if you haven't read it. We will link the article in the description below because you should really check it out. It's a long read, but it's well worth your time. We decided to talk through the points we've taken away from it and the timeline, basically, of the events that it's describing. The pre-production for Anthem lasted 5 years, from 2012 to 2017, and full production was only 12 to 6 months. No wonder this is BioWare's lowest ever score on Metacritic of 55, because that's a shambles.
I mean, they expected with their mock sort of reviews in-house that they were going to hit 70 plus, the high 70s. And
I don't know how.
That's not even particularly high, let's be honest. That's an above average game, just about.
Mm-hmm.
And they've fallen way below the actual mark. I mean, it's difficult, right? Because it's not uncommon for pre-production to go on for quite a long time in the games industry, and then come the crunch time, things all come together. But given the renowned failure that Anthem has been, all of the things that we're going to discuss today, and pre-production is obviously where it starts, it's no surprise. There's flaws from the very first time they even started conceptualizing what this game could be.
Yeah, it's an absolute mess, isn't it? I mean, pre-production, though, lasting 5 years, with full production only lasting 12 to 16 months.
Yeah, it's
horrendous.
Terrible. It's absolutely terrible, and to be honest, we're going to get more into it, obviously, as we go along, but complete mismanagement, wasn't it, from start to finish? Pre-production for 5 years is absolutely... it just smacks of people not being able to make decisions, constant arguments, I can imagine, in boardrooms, no one actually being able to take leadership of the situation and just go with it. And it seems like that happened a lot, based off the article. Yeah,
it really does. I mean, I guess, some of the first points to take away from this game as well, it wasn't actually always an online shooter. It was going to be something a lot different, wasn't it, Perks? It was going to be a bit more broader, a lot more missions, plenty more cities to check out and explore, as well as, what was it, like the land was going to be really harsh and you needed your exosuit just to survive, basically, out in the wilderness. They had a kind of NASA-inspired game. I think that was the theme they were going for, in which the exosuit sort of kept you alive out in the open world. And the idea was that you would leave your fort or city or whatever it was that you were a part of. You'd go out, you'd explore, you'd not just kill things, but you'd find things, you'd research things, you'd investigate why. I think they used a volcano as one of the areas that they'd come up with early doors. And it seems quite interesting as a concept. But obviously what we've actually got is completely different from that. I think one of the problems that they actually, the developers are quoted to have saying they had with that was that there was just too many sort of variables and how they were actually putting it together. It just didn't actually work. They needed things like random instances to take place within the world, and it just didn't really come together as well as the concept would. So great on paper, but not so much when they actually tried to make it.
Yeah, and they just going back to the point about the type of game, they say in the article that they were looking for a more sort of Dark Souls or Darkest Dungeon type game, a more hardcore experience, which I think would have been interesting if they'd have gone down that route.
Yeah, I mean,
because
obviously that's more survival based, isn't it? And now you've got some super Iron Man character
yeah,
flying around with abilities left, right, and center. So it's a complete change of initial concept.
yeah, exactly. And I am a fan of the Dark Souls type games, but I'm not sure whether it would have worked or not. I think it probably would have been a better product than what we got. So that's for sure. But this is the problem I think that they had at sort of the boardroom level, isn't it? That none of them really could figure out what the type of game they wanted it to be. They were constantly arguing about different design choices, different the way the missions were structured, and it just seems like it became a complete mess towards the end.
I mean, it's obviously healthy, don't get me wrong, to have a bunch of people sat around a table, all with different ideas, and, from week one to week two, changing their views and having new ideas come to the fore. Because quite often when you sit down and discuss sort of high concepts, things like that, it's not just the first idea that somebody comes up with that you run with from start to finish. Things do evolve over time.
I agree,
But
Perks, that it's healthy, but you need that one person, don't you, who can sit there and go, right, I didn't like that idea as much. Let's run with the other idea.
yeah, because
Yeah.
without a leader or a manager of that kind of group, you just end up with the ideas bouncing from one to the next and it never stops. That's what's happened here. And instead of just fleshing out ideas or helping them evolve, which was a word that I intentionally used before, more often than not, it was just scratched and they started again. So all the time and effort they'd put into things in the first place was gone, regardless of how long it took. And it was just, hey, let's start again because these are the tools we have at our disposal.
I know people might not like this comparison, but it reminds me of the way Star Wars is going in the movie universe.
Oh, they'll make this
because-
worse for me.
I know. I'm sorry to bring it up, but the comparisons are there, aren't they? Different directors for the different Star Wars films. I mean, there was how many different sort of directors would there have been for this game, for example? I mean, it seemed like there was about 5 or 6 at once, almost, like trying to make different decisions. And the comparison's there for me. It's just, this is what happens, I think, when I know people like to say that there shouldn't be one person in control of things and it should be a more, sort of holistic approach and everyone should get a say and things like that. But I think sometimes you need that one person that's just got that vision and to drive with it, and people can improve on that vision. I'm not saying that people can't sort of contribute to that and add things to it or take things away, but there has to be one clear person there that goes, right, this is what we're going to do. This is the direction we're going in. Yes, you can make comments. Maybe this should be like this. Maybe that should be like that. But we stick to the first vision. And I don't think that happened with this game.
Yeah.
Too many cooks spoil the broth.
Yeah, exactly.
They can do. Like you said, I think you need that one guy who will lead, have a little bit of open-mindedness, because you can make changes in some cases, but by all accounts, they just didn't. I mean, after 2014, actually, after Casey Hudson left and was replaced by, who was the person? Let me take a look. It was John Warner, replaced him as game director. And apparently after that, BioWare veterans had likened Casey Hudson to being like Jean-Luc Picard of the Star Trek Enterprise. Like, he captained the ship, he drove them forward, and once he went, basically they lost that captain, and by all accounts John Warner didn't do a very good job.
Well,
yeah,
looking at the article, like my conspiracy theory on this is a lot of the people at BioWare wanted this game to fail. Obviously, I don't know them individually.
Why do you think that?
Like, well, in the article, it goes on to say, that this was like a common theme for BioWare, that pre-production usually lasted a long time. The game seemed to be going nowhere, in the case of Mass Effect and also Dragon Age Inquisition. And then obviously that final like crunch stage of post-production, where everyone kicked into gear at the end and the game sort of took shape, happened with all the games. It happened with Mass Effect, it happened with Dragon Age Inquisition, and it seems to be working out, at least okay for them. And obviously with this one, it hasn't worked out okay. But what's interesting, in the notes, obviously in this article, is that a lot of employees were taking time off work for mental health issues, related to stress. because obviously there's been a lot of stories about crunch. I think Rockstar were in the news probably 3 months ago regarding Red Dead Redemption 2, and then a lot of the employees just sort of backed down and retracted their initial comments, saying that they were working like 20-hour days or whatever it was, because obviously it didn't look good for Rockstar. But we all know this goes on in the games industry. Like, it's one of the reasons why when I was an aspiring chubby little game developer in college, I decided I don't want any part of this business, because I saw crunch and I saw people working 100-hour weeks, and they were just like, oh, this is normal. It's like, it's kind of not, though, because it's kind of illegal. They're not even getting paid for it a lot of the time.
They were sleeping in pizza boxes and stuff like that.
It's absolutely... It's a common theme. It does go on all the time in the industry, and it actually said in the article a lot of the developers wanted Dragon Age Inquisition to fail because just as a way of saying this method of making games doesn't work. So yeah, it might have worked with Mass Effect, it might have worked with Dragon Age, it might have half worked with Mass Effect Andromeda, but we all know that was a disappointment, and now it's finally bit them with Anthem.
Yeah, I
can't even remember the game then.
Yeah, I can't. They all sort of blend into one, but Matty's point does have a lot of merit about, I think, actually thinking about it, that I think a lot of people at BioWare now, looking at it, probably are glad the game's not doing as well as it could have done, because similar to what Matty brings out with in the article it says about Dragon Age, doesn't it? How towards the end, a lot of the people there were kind of hoping that the game didn't do very well, so that the practices might be addressed in future games, and I don't think that will have changed. I think there'll be people there now thinking like, oh, I really hope this game doesn't take off, because we don't want to encourage these sort of practices, because, you know, EA are a big company. We know that they prioritize, you know, one thing over the other if it makes money. And yes, obviously from a business point of view, that makes complete sense. We understand that. But sometimes I think you have to take a slightly different view to it, because these things don't last forever. You know, EA, you know, as a company like this, it won't last forever. So they need to be careful, I think, with what they do in future.
Well, I think the biggest worry, though, for those devs and people like that who've gone through those crunch times is that BioWare might not even exist, so they might not even have a job in a few years.
Well, if it is a protest vote, you know, and they've purposely wrecked Anthem, you know, to rise up against their EA overlords, it's more than likely that they'll end up, you know, binned off. It's not like EA are going to be really sympathetic. They'll just be like, right, see you later, lads. We don't need you anymore. Maybe they do want to be unshackled from EA. Maybe that's part of this, the reasoning behind this as well. But EA aren't going to take any prisoners. If the game's not doing well, and, you know, they find out, if they do some sort of review into the production of this game, and if a lot of what they're saying is true, they'll just bury BioWare in an instant. They don't care.
Yeah, they only care about profits, really, don't they? But to be fair to EA, it's not all their fault in this instance.
No, absolutely not. But it's like, you can't really, at this point, you know, we all pitch EA, don't we, as like this evil overlord that's, you know, looking down, and they're just getting the guillotine out and they're ready to cut BioWare's head off. But to be fair, they kind of deserve it, because their last two games have been absolutely appalling, in my opinion. I know a lot of you guys like Mass Effect, but I think Mass Effect Andromeda was bad, and I think
failed,
Anthem,
didn't it, really?
Well, like I said, I haven't even played Anthem, and obviously I never will at this point. But obviously the general consensus is that that's an absolute abomination of a game, and I'm just going to go with the sheep on that one and follow the crowd and concur that that's an abomination. So
this article doesn't make you want to buy it, no?
Yeah, no.
The game needs you, man. Come on, BioWare needs you.
Mate, I wouldn't buy it if it was in one of those £1 bargain baskets in Game Station back in the day at the front of the store.
I think we're at the point almost where they should be paying you to play the game rather than the other way around. I mean,
I don't even think Matty would accept their money to play it. I think you
yeah,
have to pay him a hell of a lot.
You know what it's going to end up like? Do you remember Defiance on the 360?
Yeah,
it's
vaguely.
Like a big MMO, and that's like 1p everywhere pre-owned. And there's just like thousands of copies of it pre-owned. It's like this online MMO that never took off. And I imagine when the Anthem servers get shut down in like a year's time, that's where all the Anthem discs are going to be, in the pre-owned section, like game for, you know, like 20p.
Yeah, it could happen.
Probably won't take it long to
It's
get
where it
there.
deserves to be honest, by the sounds of
Yeah.
it.
I mean, back on topic on sort of Casey Hudson going and where they went from there. I think it was really bizarre to see that when he left, the quote in the article from him is the foundation of our new IP in Edmonton is complete.
Well,
And the team is ready to move it forward into pre-production on a title that I think will redefine interactive entertainment.
bigger lol.
Well, it definitely did that, but on a downward spiral rather than an upward one. So one thing that we'll never know, because obviously it's way too long ago and we're not privy to such information, is what the hell condition did he actually leave that in?
Mm.
What was he so confident of, or was that literally just a smokescreen of "I'm going, this is crap, don't
Is
blame
that a
me"?
PR spin, or is it
Yeah.
actually, a very well? I guess if he thought it was that good, it feels more like a PR spin, especially with how the game's turned out. I mean, how much change could they have made?
Right,
Changes.
or was he
They
just
must have
really good at
scrapped it.
masking it to the masses that sort of worked there, at the same time? Was it like they all believed in him because he just smokescreened so well, and then he left, and then they realized, actually, we've been
We're in
sold out
shit.
horribly here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the thing to point out about that is how many times, I've heard this before from different articles that I've read about. Yeah, a lot of these sort of big name people like Casey Hudson or Amy Henning, people like that, big name sort of developers, they get all the credit for a lot of these things, but there's a lot of people working underneath them that do a lot of the work, and it's just that they're sort of Casey Hudson's the poster child, isn't it? Or Amy Henning's the poster child of the game, and I think that does happen quite a lot in this industry. I think there's a lot of people. I'm not saying they don't work hard, because clearly they do. Casey Hudson,
but
I'm
they're
sure,
not the
works very
ones
hard. But
referenced in the pizza boxes.
yeah.
They're the ones
Yeah.
who get to take all the credit,
Yeah,
and it's
they
the
get all the
guys and
credit,
girls who
and-
do 24-hour working days who
And when things
make
go
the magic
wrong,
happen.
they're the ones where people go, oh, well, they probably didn't listen to Casey Hudson. Even when things go wrong, they seem to come out of it with some credit. And I think that needs to change a little bit, because there's clearly a lot of developers there, a lot of talented developers that have had to leave as well, have left in the last few years, that I'm sure BioWare would want to keep around. And these sort of the comments from Casey Hudson, things like that, just don't help, do they? They just don't help.
I wonder how many of them they actually think have left, when in reality they're just in the broom closet crying and they haven't found them yet.
No, they're
that's a
all
good
on
point.
stress leave, mate. It's like you when you're playing FIFA, you need to go on stress leave, and that's what's happened to all the developers.
You're
on stress
actually
leave
going to
in the broom
specify
closet.
me on that one rather than
Yeah,
like
yeah.
us as a collective.
No,
Hey,
no.
not me. Hey, I'll leave that
You're
to you.
definitely on stress leave for FIFA. Permanently.
He's never
I'm
going
just
But,
chill guy going.
Yeah. I was just going to harken
Never
back
rage.
to BioShock Infinite as a weird game, because that was in pre-production for ages and it was having a lot of issues. And I remember it was a big news story at the time that the developers brought on Rod Ferguson to essentially finish the game. And this is also a problem. I don't think it maybe relates to BioWare with Anthem in this instance, but a lot of developers, they have this amazing sort of image of the game and what they want it to be. And, this game is going to be 1,000 hours long, and it's going to be the game that everyone's ever wanted, and it's going to have this feature, and it's going to have that feature, and it's just it's not feasible to have all of these features. So Rod Ferguson comes in and he just gets the game done. Like BioShock Infinite, the developers were just polishing and polishing and polishing and polishing, and they were never ever actually releasing the game. And he just went in and got it done. I think it was within 6 months or something, and that was released. And then he left. So it was literally his job to finish off the game. So these creative directors, these ones at the top, do have a lot of influence, and they are extremely important when it comes to getting these games out, and it comes to getting them out correctly, getting them out in a way where people are gonna like the game and get on with the game. Really, it's hard to explain in Anthem why it went so wrong, but without a proper director, if that is the case, and Casey Hudson was this big Captain Picard or however they were describing him, the big boss man, him
People
leaving.
followed him.
That's going to have a massive effect on the game when you haven't got any direction. And it just feels like they didn't have any direction at all, because the game has just copied all of the common tropes from every other sort of shared world shooter and just said, yeah, this is our game. You know what I mean? It's like they didn't have a creative director who had any vision for the game. They sort of had a mush of a platform. They had a rough idea of what they wanted it to be. And then it was like, right, we need to make a game with what we've got. What can we do? Let's copy Destiny. I'm still convinced that someone went into the office one day and just like sort of sighed and just went, oh, let's just copy Destiny.
Hey, apparently they weren't allowed to talk about Destiny, Matt. Destiny was...
that was banned, wasn't it? The talk of Destiny.
Destiny banned.
Destiny and Division were the two...
they called it a taboo word, didn't they?
Yeah.
I think that the strange thing is that they couldn't have looked at Destiny, because you can talk about the rough spells with that game, but if they actually looked at Destiny whilst this was being developed, they would have had an okay game at the end. I'm not saying it would have been great, but it's not a Destiny clone, because Destiny's okay. Anthem is garbage. So if they actually cloned it like for like, they would have done okay. They probably would have hit their 7.
Well, you always said, why didn't they just take a look at other games in the genre, see what they've done well, see what they've done bad?
That's just a common thing as well. That's not something that's sort of rocket science.
No, exactly.
That's just something that you would do in any field, in anything you were making. When you make something, you look at what other people have done first and you look to improve on it.
Exactly.
It's just
Common
so
sense.
Simple.
Yeah.
It's like, what's good about it, we'll keep that. What's bad about it, we'll get rid of that. And what can we put in that makes it unique? It's really straightforward, and it's just something they haven't done at all in any aspect of the game, whether it's the loot, the story, the gameplay, everything is
but
just below.
I just come back to the fact that if you've not got that central person actually with the initial idea, and it's just a mismatch of different ideas, you're not going to get that, because people are just going to argue and go, you're going to get people saying, well, I like this bit about Destiny. Well, I don't. Okay, we won't do anything about it then. I don't like this bit about Destiny. Oh, I do. I quite like it. See, you can imagine the conversations that happen. And this has been one of the problems, where if you've got someone central there that's sort of just saying, no, we'll go with this. This is what we're going to go with. Okay. We'll go with maybe what the majority say or something, or there needs to be some sort of system sometimes, I think, because this is what happens when
you shouldn't be pandering to
like
anybody. You shouldn't be pandering to anybody as a game developer. You need your own creative vision, and you need to stick with that. And I think there's too many developers now. Okay, there are certain established like traits in games and elements from other games that we'd expect. For a shooter, there's like a standard control scheme, for example, in like every shooter. You pick up any shooter on a console and you put the controller in your hands, you're going to roughly know how to play it, because a lot of the control schemes are very similar. There are certain elements of games that are transferred across all games because it just makes sense. But to make a real success, to make a game that is worth playing, to make a game that hits those 90s on Metacritic, you need a creative director who has a strong vision and imposes that vision on the game. And obviously that can work the other way as well. That can be a vision that turns out to be a load of garbage, but it can also be brilliant. And I think not having any vision and just sort of going, we're going to copy this game, we're going to copy that, we're going to copy this element, gamers can smell that a mile off, you know what I mean, when it's just a cut and paste clone of a game with no soul. And I think that's just is pretty much the definition of Anthem. Without even playing it, I can just tell that it is soulless. You know what I mean? You can tell that, yeah, it's got good visuals and the gameplay's good, but there's no soul to it. There's no heart. You can tell that no one really cared when they were putting it together.
Yeah, well, picking up on those comments, just going back to the timeline in the article. So after Casey Hudson leaves in 2014, John Warner comes in, and then in early 2015, the story started to change drastically. Veteran Dragon Age writer David Gaider, I don't know how you'd pronounce that, moved over to Anthem, and his vision of the story looked a lot different than the ideas with which they'd been experimenting with for the past few years. Gaider's style was traditional BioWare, big, complicated villains, ancient aliens, artifacts, and so on. Anthem design director, though, Preston... well, this is even harder to say. Preston Watamanuk had... maybe I probably butchered that name, I'm sorry. I'd pushed him in a science fantasy direction, but comments like "it's very Dragon Age" kept coming up regarding any of the work me or the team did. This is Gaider's comments. And then he left BioWare in early 2016, saying, "As time passed, I didn't feel keen to play the game that I was working on." So again, it's just more changes. I mean, how long was he there, really? So he was there for around a year, changing the story, and they just didn't like what he was producing, I guess. Too similar to Dragon Age, and then he leaves, and they have to start again with the story.
I mean, it comes back to what I said before about not just tweak things, it's we have to start again. And that is just time that you don't have in environments like that. I think the crazy thing is that as part of the development process, we've talked so much already about how they're not allowed to look at this, or they're not allowed to talk about these games or those games because that's taboo and that's not what we're about. And then they brought somebody in who is the Dragon Age guy, basically.
A veteran of BioWare as well.
Yeah, who is obviously going to come in and stick to what he knows, which is Dragon Age. So everything's going to fall in line. Villains, artifacts, weird alien races and stuff like that. And then people are going to go, we've kind of seen this before. And he's going to be thinking, well, yeah, this is what I do. This is what I'm good at. And the direction has gone from you're not allowed to copy anything to just kind of come in and copy what we've already done before. It's just another thing in a long line of disasters for them.
Yeah, it just keeps piling up, doesn't it, at this point in the timeline? I mean, it only gets worse, but, it keeps piling up at this point.
I mean, let's be honest, it's no surprise he didn't last very long there, because the resistance from people was, it's too Dragon Age-y, or this isn't really what it's about. And he must be thinking, well, what the hell have I been brought in here to do? Like, I'm trying to save this.
Yeah, this is the problem.
This
is the problem with different visions like this. You bring someone in that has worked on games like Dragon Age, and obviously, their style of story, the way they do story is going to be like Dragon Age, because that's what that they've just worked on. That's what they were brought in from. So it's very difficult for someone like that to transition, I think, to a different setting completely. Now, I think he actually says, doesn't he, in the article that actually his wheelhouse, it kind of is sort of sci-fi fantasy. I think he says that in the article. But so what he's saying is basically, he wouldn't have minded too much, about transitioning into a sort of Anthem sci-fi type game. But by the sounds of it, because BioWare themselves just didn't have a clue what sort of story they wanted. They didn't know whether they wanted it to be heavy sci-fi, light sci-fi, sort of more, fantasy. They just didn't know, did they? This was the problem. And
well, they didn't know if it was even going to be story-driven.
Well, exactly.
At one point.
So, they've brought this guy in clearly out of, maybe not out of desperation, but out of well, here he is. He's finished on Dragon Age. He's, clearly done a good job there with the story. So we'll bring him in and see what happens. And it's like it's like throwing things up in the air and seeing what lands, isn't it? That's what it seems to me with this. Especially with the story, it's like we'll just throw 20 ideas in the air, and whichever 3 land first, we'll just go with them.
Is there a story in Anthem? Sorry, I wasn't aware that there was one.
Yeah, it's pretty bog standard, really. It's not very good.
Matty, it's kind of what you said before, really. You talked about Rod Ferguson and how he came in and closed up with Bioshock Infinite. The story in Anthem, and there's no proof that this is the case, but you can see it a mile off, like Stevie Wonder could. It's so clear that there was nothing at the end, and the closing team came in and said, what on earth, just throw this in. It is the most boring generic story ever, and it gets told in such a quick space of time. The twists and turns are not even twists and turns. It's pointless. If you watched it as a film, you throw the film away and never watch it again.
All right. Good concise review of the story there.
Yeah, it's pointless. If the game would actually be better if it wasn't in the game, because it just brings it down even more.
That is actually a good point. I do wonder whether, like you said, maybe if they had less story elements, maybe the game would have actually been better in an ironic way, even though they would have obviously got a lot of flack for not having any sort of story, but they could have maybe focused on better elements of the game, improving the game. Maybe.
I know we're going to obviously discuss further, into this article, but can we just make a pact to just bury Anthem forever soon, because I'm sick of hearing its bloody names, to be honest with you. I feel like we're kicking a
I think it's burying itself, mate.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
yeah.
That is true.
There's going to
give
come
it
a
any
point
more
where
exposure.
There's going to come a point where it's pointless talking about the game anymore because it's just going to be pretty much dead. So
we know
we'll
it's a pile of rubbish, and it's buried. Well, not buried yet, but its funeral's being prepared. Definitely.
It's very
and
close.
all the Bioware employees are in attendance at this funeral. It's going to be a nice little service, and then it'll be buried forever, or maybe cremated. Who knows?
Could be their funeral as well at the same time. To be very honest.
Yeah,
They might not be as happy about that.
No.
Well, that'll be when EA come in with the machine gun and just mow them all down.
This turned very dark.
It has turned a bit dark.
Very fast.
Already in the last 10 seconds, we've just put together a better story than all of Anthem. So
it does sound
pretty
more
much.
interesting, to be fair.
yeah, the genocide of Anthem and everyone at BioWare.
Oh,
Yep.
Anyway, we'll move back to the timeline because you mentioned EA, so I might as well transition to them. Patrick Soderlund, who was the executive vice president EA, tested a Christmas demo in 2016, and he found it totally unacceptable. So, apparently an entirely new build was built just for him.
Absolutely ridiculous. I just that is one of the standout things from that statement you've just read. They literally spent 2 months not focusing on anything else apart from, and that isn't exaggeration to say that. They do say, don't they? We literally focused only on creating a demo to please Patrick Soderlund. I mean, absolutely ridiculous.
Madness.
I just cannot understand that whatsoever. I mean, I get that he's the big boss at EA and, and all that, but they should be focusing on what's best to make a great game for gamers, not focusing on what one person that, let's be honest, knows a lot less than the developers there about game making. He
just wanted to be wowed by something, and his big complaint was about the graphics, and he wasn't impressed with that. So basically, they put together, like you said, in that short-ish space of time, but it detracted from the rest of the time they needed. And they put together a pretty-looking test demo for him with nice graphics, and that was...
They put flying back in as well, didn't they?
Exactly, yeah. They were sort of to and fro in of flying being in and out. They did that back and forth from day one.
It's lucky they put that back in, by the way. That's the best part of that game. The flying mechanic.
You can't even argue that. But that was the thing that wowed Soderlund going forward. It looked great. You could fly. And that's where really it got its main direction from, because he was impressed with it. And there's quite a few quotes from some of the anonymous developers within the article, but it was basically met with a bunch of devs sitting around saying, okay, but this isn't actually what we're doing. This is just pleasing Soderlund. This is just a test thing. And then it was hit with, oh my God, we're actually doing this.
The thing it says to me, Perks, is that there was clearly an element of fear there. I think there's an element of... the whole thing smacks of fear, doesn't it? The whole development process. Fear of EA coming in and being like, not good enough, bye. Because we've seen it before. Visceral. Look at Visceral, what happened to them. BioWare probably saw that and thought, oh no, we really have to keep on EA's good side. So, and what's one of the things that wouldn't keep on the good side? Not, displeasing the main boss. So I do think there's definitely an element of fear there where they've gone, he's come in, said, don't like this rubbish. And they've pretty much gone, oh, quick, low, panicking, like, oh, we need to find a demo that pleases him, or else the axe is coming on us.
Yeah.
And that's just not a healthy environment to work in.
Yeah. On that topic, I really hope that Phil Spencer from Xbox doesn't come into any of these new game studios and do that and say, I want this to be more like Destiny, because that's his favourite game, isn't it, Uncle Phil? Destiny's his favourite game. He's played about 1,000 hours of it, so he's just going to walk in.
I was going to say, you confusing me and Uncle Phil.
Yeah,
maybe
he's
He's
going to walk into like Obsidian's office and they're making some epic RPG, and it's just like, no, this isn't like Destiny. We need it to be more like Destiny. Just cancel everything.
Just a quick off-topic point about that. I don't know if you've heard about this, Matty, before. Apparently, behind the scenes, Phil Spencer is a very ruthless operator.
Doesn't surprise me.
Looks can be deceiving. Or...
Yeah, apparently behind the scenes he is very ruthless, so that would not surprise me. I'm not saying he's going to make. This is
the thing. Like Phil Spencer, a lot of other people have gone on record as saying it. You've just got to let it, and it's obviously very difficult difficult because, say, if you're Microsoft or EA, it's their money that they're pumping into this. They're the ones pumping the millions into advertising. They're the ones pumping the millions into production costs. And it must be very tempting for them to come in and say, this is what we want. This isn't acceptable, you know. But it's one of them things, video games they are still an art form. And a lot of the art has to be left to the developers, because if you constantly keep putting your hand in and wanting them to change things, nothing's ever going to get done. And this is, you know, just emphasized perfectly with Anthem. You know what I mean? It's constantly people coming in and saying this isn't right, and then constantly changing members of staff. You can't pander to everybody, you know. And it's obviously something that they were too scared to do, but they shouldn't have pandered to him. If they had a vision for the game and it was truly a vision that they believed in, when he came in and said he didn't like this, the creative director or whoever it is would have gone to him and told him why it is the way it is, and their sort of overall vision for the game, not just, you know, instantly said, "Oh right, we'll change it for you." That's not really how it should work. You know what I mean?
You can maybe make a few tweaks, but completely changing it. I mean, it's like with the flying mechanic. They put it in and out, or they put it in and took it out so many times, apparently, that it just made a lot of the work that the devs had done for like 6 months just pointless. Because, oh, well, no, we don't have the flying mechanic in anymore. It's like, well, the level design's got to change all again now.
Yeah, exactly. So
madness.
they designed massive open spaces to accommodate flight, and then they took it away, and then you had open spaces that you had to run around, and it was like, oh, we have to build everything again. They did that, and then they put flying back in, and they just destroyed all their work again.
Oh,
I
it must
think
have been so frustrating.
one of the best quotes in the whole article, and it's a great point to mention this after all the confusion and differences of opinion in design leads and such, is one of the devs said the root cause of all of this was the lack of vision. They actually said, "What are we making? Please tell us." Nobody had an idea. They were all working their asses off, and they didn't even know why or what it was for. They just make this, make that, and in a few days it'll probably get scrapped, but do it anyway.
Horrendous leadership from the top. Unbelievable.
I always sing their praises, and it, you know, rightly so, but one of the companies that does it so right is obviously Sony with regards to first party. And there's been so many instances, especially this generation, where developers have taken ages to make games, way longer than people expected. Insomniac took a lot longer than expected with Spider-Man, and obviously you've got Bench Studios. It's literally taken them like 5 years to make Days Gone. And obviously Sony went in there and they wouldn't have been happy with the way things are going, and they would have wanted these games to release quicker. But at the end of the day, they had trust in the developers, and they didn't come in there and say, you need to change this, you need to do this, you need to get that out now. Sometimes you just need to sit back and go, actually listen to the developers, have, you know, constructive dialogue. And if they're telling you, we need another year to make this, you know, we know this was due to come out in March this year, but we need another year. And sometimes you just have to sit back, swallow your pride, and just say, okay, you know what I mean? You can't force it with games, especially. It's such an amazing art form, and obviously you need the games to come out, but you also don't want it to be rushed. There's a sweet spot, and it's the developers themselves that know what that sweet spot is, and it's just about having trust in them. And it seems like EA have no trust in any of the developers.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because what you've just described is the polar opposite as to the circumstances that BioWare were actually operating under. They were scheduled for the fall 2018 launch, and EA told them quite unequivocally, you cannot go past the end of the fiscal year in 2019. That it has to be out by then. That's the bottom line. There is no flexibility to them there. So, I mean, if they weren't already scared about how things were going to end up, to get hit with something like that, which is literally just a couple of months or a few months of an extension, that's crazy. When you see how many titles in the past have been delayed and turned out into masterpieces. Sure, you've got the examples of Crackdown 3, which was delayed for years and turned out to be garbage.
Not quite a masterpiece,
knew it would be. No, but that's the opposite.
More like
side.
a child's drawing on the fridge.
I think.
Yeah, so you can delay things for the right reasons, and you can delay things just to delay the inevitable. So
One of the best examples, I think, that I've saw, people talk about this quite a lot, is The Last of Us. Now, that had a lot of pre-production problems, and that game was in sort of development hell for a while. But I mean, look how that turned out in the end. So it can go well. And you mentioned about Sony, and that's an example where Sony, probably similar to Days Gone, went in there thinking at first, no, this isn't good enough. This isn't what we wanted. And then eventually, working with Naughty Dog, they've managed to work it out, and it's all gone right in the end. But you just don't get the same sense that BioWare and EA have the same relationship that maybe Naughty Dog and Sony have. That's the big difference, I think, there.
If Days Gone would have been rushed, it would have turned into DayZ in all likelihood.
Yeah.
Which has been absolutely hammered.
From the previews, I don't know if you saw for Days Gone, it actually seems like it might actually be a pretty good game now. So
I'm sure it will be, because it was allowed that extra time. So
time will tell.
Can't deny the good examples.
Anthem definitely didn't get the time that they needed. What were you going to say, Matt?
I was going to say, time will tell on Days Gone, but, the common thread on most of the games that have been, well received, masterpieces, shall we say, this generation, is that they've all had time. Red Dead Redemption was in development for years. Same with God of War. Same with Spider-Man. They were delayed. People get annoyed by delays, and, it's understandable. If we're looking for a new game and we see it at E3 and it's like, that looks really amazing, we're pumped for that in 2019 or whenever the trailer says it's going to come out, and then it gets delayed. It is, annoying. It's something that's like, I was looking forward to that. Yep, that one. It's not really something that happens in movies and stuff like that. It is something that's really more related to games. You wouldn't see, like, say, Avengers, for example. Can you imagine how annoyed people would be if it was like, right, it's not out April 26th anymore, it's delayed for 12 months. People would be going berserk.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's just a common theme, and something that I think Sony have started doing, Microsoft needs to start doing, and just all developers, to be honest, is just don't announce release dates like a year in advance, because it is such a stupid thing to do, because it puts unnecessary pressure on the developers. And if something goes wrong in that development process, they just have to sit there and say, we can't fix this in time for this release date, and they just basically have to release a substandard broken game. And that must be so demoralizing, especially when they've put 3-4 years of their life into this project, and then to be said, we're not going to give you any more time because we've announced a stupid release date 2.5 years in advance, and you've got to hit it.
I was going to say, though, with this game, to be fair, they did have a lot of time, but the problem was that it was a mess. The structure of it.
I think the E3 trailer.
Given more time.
I agree, but I think the E3 trailer last year, I think that was one of the reasons why they wanted this pushed out the door so quickly, because I don't know if you remember, but that E3 trailer got so much hype. People like, wow, this looks amazing. This is going to be the next big shooter. Everyone's going to want to buy this. And that hit, and I know what EA would have been thinking, like, yeah, we need to get this out now. You know what I mean? We're not doing so well at the moment. A lot of big games for EA have tanked. So obviously they were thinking, this is a really hyped up game. People are really into this. We need to release this as soon as possible to capitalize on all the hype. And that's probably why they said that this can't be released, before
we're going to
the
get
end of the
onto
fiscal
the
year.
E3 trailer. But before we do, just jumping back to the timeline, because to do with EA, Patrick Soderlund was also the Frostbite Engine, which the BioWare devs weren't happy with. It wasn't good enough for what they envisioned, basically, and they ended up losing people who were working on Frostbite to another project, which was FIFA 19. Again, more development problems there.
I mean, Frostbite caused them a big problem, didn't it? Because they'd gone from sort of having their own third-party engines to all being, because of what Soderlund wanted, it was a company-wide Frostbite. So whichever game you worked on, you used the same engine. And it created problems in itself because people just hadn't used it. And the things that they were used to doing on other engines, on the third-party ones that they'd used quite successfully, they didn't exist within Frostbite. I think one of the quotes was that you didn't have like a third-person camera in the Frostbite engine, for example.
Yeah.
They had to build one. And
they had to build quite a few things, didn't they, by all accounts?
Exactly. So there's quite a few references in the article as a whole, but to not have something like that, something that you would consider probably something that you'd take for granted in all likelihood, a developer in this day and age, not having access to something like that in an engine is like, really? We have to build that? So they were working with software that even they didn't understand. And there's quotes again from the devs basically saying if you needed help with something, no one really could because no one made this within, so they couldn't exactly call up a team and say, "Oh, you've worked on this before. How do you do this?" Not many of them knew. So the Frostbite specific team, like you said, was assigned to EA's biggest title, which was FIFA at the time. So they had no resources, they had no point of contact or help with it. It was just, this is what you're using, get on with it.
Yeah.
And
what was one of the
that was a
quotes?
disaster.
Didn't they describe it as razor blade?
Yeah, they said Frostbite is full of razor blades, which I guess translates to you have to be very careful, otherwise you're going to bleed out working with this crap.
Well, we've seen this before, haven't we? This was a problem for Destiny 2, Destiny 1 and 2 as well, Perks, with the engine. Them talking about things taking 4 or 5 days to make that should take 12 hours to make and stuff like that. This is a problem that seems to happen. It seems to be more of a common problem with some of these engines recently.
Well, Bungie made the same, I'll call it a mistake, I guess it probably is. They made the same mistake in making their Destiny engine. I'm not sure what it's called because it's an in-house one. But they made it, and then they realized it had a load of restrictions, which restricted them, and it restricted content going forward. But hey, they committed to it, so that's what they had to work with. And it was way too late by the time they realized they couldn't start again. And that is the risk, I guess, of developing an in-house engine. I guess the flip side of that is that once you've worked with it and made a few mistakes and ironed out the issues, is that going forward, ideally, you're in good shape because the more you familiarize yourself with it, the better your future products will be. But we may never get to find out.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It doesn't look like we will. Moving back again to the timeline, so Mark Dara as well also joins the project in 2017 just to get this game done basically and make decisions to push it to release. And then we also get the E3 2018, which basically it was fake footage. Barely a single mission had been created. And the name was initially going to be Beyond, not Anthem. T-shirts were even made before the event and changed just before E3. I mean, what a mess this is.
Yeah, I mean, that's once again just more mismanagement, more not knowing what they're doing.
This has happened at E3 before, though, to be fair. Not that I'm defending it, but fake footage and E3, they go hand in hand. It always happens. The most famous one was Watch Dogs, I think. Do you remember the E3 trailer for Watch Dogs back in the day? And it looked like literally it was going to be one of the best games ever made. And then the game was literally nothing like it at all. So it does happen. So I'm not surprised.
I think with this one, though, it was so far apart, wasn't it? The Anthem trailer from what the game actually ended up being. There was things in that trailer that just never even anything near like what is in reality. I think that was one of the problems.
Well, I actually remember watching that because the Xbox provided a 4K stream to my TV at the time, and I somehow actually managed to stream it in 4K without any hitches. But
it just gave the 4K stream to you. You personally,
yeah.
just to your TV. Right?
Literally that. Phil Spencer sorted me out. He said, we want you to buy an Xbox One X, Matty. We're going to provide you this 4K stream for your own personal consumption. I was like, cheers, Phil.
Very nice of him. Uncle Phil.
Yeah, Uncle Phil. But yeah, anyway. When I watched that stream, I said that it doesn't look like an Xbox One X game. I remember saying it at the time because I remember watching every game on that 4K stream up until that point, and they looked very good, don't get me wrong. But when I saw that, I was like, wow, that looks absolutely incredible. This cannot be an Xbox One X game. This is not Xbox One X footage. And obviously I was proven right on that one because the graphical downgrade is absolutely massive compared to that E3 trailer.
Anthem really doesn't have a good history of E3 to what is in actuality. The first time it was shown there, they shown things that were claimed as being actual in-game footage, and everything you're about to see was within the game. That's the biggest lie probably that they've ever told.
Oh, yeah.
Because they had a Fort Tarsus instance in which it was exciting and vibrant, and people running around and coming up to you and doing their own things.
It's literally dead in the game.
Beyond dead. It's crazy. They
Beyond
had,
Dead.
That would have been a good name for the game, actually.
Just on the name itself, what do we think? I mean, do we think that Anthem is actually a better name than Beyond, or?
Well, I think Anthem's a better name than Beyond, but I don't think it's a better name than Beyond Dead.
Yeah, Beyond Dead was pretty good.
Beyond Dead was definitely better, but yeah, I think
Beyond, Anthem doesn't
know.
really mean anything.
They're a bit weak.
Yeah, that's what I'd say as well. And the fact that they mentioned that they literally had to make up sort of the Anthem of creation because they'd made up this name, like just on the fly. It's sort of like they've centered the whole plot around the Anthem of creation, and originally that had nothing to do with anything. So that pretty much says it all, really, to me.
Which, by the way, as being the most key component of the story, is utterly useless.
Yeah.
Very honestly.
Yeah.
So they changed the name to represent something that they were going to just shove in and hope for the best, and pretty much got what they deserved on that one.
Also, at this point, what was it, like a single mission had only been created?
Yeah, it was kind of coinciding with that, and with them having the firm release date of you can't go past this. They'd only done one mission, but they didn't have a game for that mission. They put that together, but they didn't actually know how the game was yet. So
that's mad.
What we see and play today, it wasn't a mission design for that. It was just a mission design. So absolutely crazy.
Yeah, the fact that they'd gone like you say, one mission, and I think it was the start. Was it the start of late 2017? They only had one mission and the game done.
Yeah,
I mean that is.
But no actual game is the scary
The game was
part
due
of
to
that.
come out 9 or 10 months later, and they've got one mission done in the game. I mean that just.
And they've been working on it since 2012.
Yeah, I mean that is almost unbelievable, really, isn't it? And
it's shocking.
It just goes. All the developers that said this game needed another 6 to 8 months in the oven, maybe even more than that, it was true, wasn't it? Based off that, because I mean, not even just based off that, based off our experience with the game, it was true. The game needed at least another few months, and I think as well. This is one of the problems in the EA side, I think, because EA obviously, and I can kind of understand it, because let's be honest, the game had been in production for a long time, and they were probably like, "Come on, just get the game out now. We're spending more and more money." But on the other hand, they must have looked at this and gone, maybe on this occasion, yes, we might lose a bit more money initially because of it. But the upside is people actually like the game. It gets a high review, say early 80s, mid 80s sort of reviews. People like it, and people want to play it in the future. Whereas now, they've lost sales because of it. They're not going to get many sales in the future because of it. And, they're back to square one because they wanted to create a sort of Destiny Division type experience for themselves, because obviously Activision have Destiny, or did have Destiny, I should say.
Yeah.
And Ubisoft had Division. So
and
EA
you're not allowed to talk about those games, remember, as well.
Well, exactly. But EA is the third big, one of the three big companies there. Would want their own version, and they haven't got it still. So are they going to go looking for it again? Are they going to give up? Are they going to go back to, just their multiplayer focused games? Who knows?
They are absolutely done with this. I know we're fast forwarding a long time here and we're going to jump back, but EA won't continue with this in the long run. It's impossible.
Well,
EA won't continue in the long run.
Yeah, with it not being profitable, it does feel like obviously they just ditch it. I mean, they've got a history of doing that, so
that's still obviously a massive selling franchise for them, and then just be done with it. Get rid of FIFA and get out. Press the bloody eject button.
So, just going back to this though as well, BioWare Austin had warned them, the main team in Edmonton, that this game needed to have some fixes and needed to implement some different things, because the team in Austin had created the Old Republic game, the Star Wars Old Republic game, which is obviously an online service, and they'd been through similar issues, and they knew the feedback and what's best to do and stuff, and literally they were ignored because they are the B team.
Right. And they were the ones who had launched an online game, a game as a service, and went through all the roughness and had all the bad feedback,
and
got it to a very serviceable
good
state. Yeah, made something that was pretty good, and they were told nah. And it's quite funny because the Austin team, as well as having their ideas shut down in there, was that they even said that they didn't understand the concept of what Anthem was. They literally asked the question, there's quotes from the devs, what was it? It was never made clear to us. So how on earth do you then bring people in who haven't really been working on this before, bring them together to help you finalize things, or maybe not finalize, but the mid to final part of the game, and they don't even know what it is. You don't even know what it is because you've had no direction from the top either. So now you've got more people in who are
more confused,
just as confused, because they haven't had the years prior of being confused. And yeah, but they have a whole new studio in that don't know what they're doing. I mean, this is great, isn't it?
Seems like there was a lot of, we talked sometimes about healthy rivalry, but this seems to me like unhealthy rivalry with these differing teams. There seems to be a lot of sort of, well, we're the A team, we're the Edmonton team, we're going to do what we want because we've made the Mass Effect trilogy and the good Dragon Ages. And, you've just made, a game that, fairly successful, the Old Republic, but nowhere near the level of the Mass Effect trilogy and the early Dragon Age games. So I suppose you could say you can understand it from the team's point of view in terms of they think they're the top dogs, so why are they going to listen to an under team? But
the under team had done an online service.
That's the thing. That's the silly thing about it, isn't it?
Yeah.
They should be taking on board ideas from a team that knows how to operate with this sort of game. And it just seems like
it's very naive.
Arrogance. It's arrogance, isn't it, really, as well? It's a lot of arrogance. Clearly a lot of arrogant people there, I imagine. Maybe high up that wouldn't accept people trying to tell them what to do. And that's what's contributed to this.
I mean, let's be very honest here. I think it is the high up people. It was the people who were leading without actually making decisions and leading, if you like. There's no way the sort of frontline devs who were there just on the day-to-day guys, they would have been crying out for help.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And they would have known that this experienced studio who's launched a game as a service and got it to a very good state are coming to help, thinking, thank God. And that they don't even get that help really because the concept is just blurred to them and they were never really told how to help.
No, and the best part of it as well is the Austin team have been handed this game now.
Yeah,
they're now taking the game forward. So it's like, here's this
they'll probably actually improve the game.
Piece of shit.
They'll actually go and improve the game a lot more than they would have done without the Edmonton team. So.
They just turn up with a coffin and just tip the corpse out onto the floor and go, yeah, that's yours now.
I think it's a positive move if you're a fan of the game, though. If you're a fan of the game and you want to see the game improve. Well, there will be people out there. I mean,
really?
Not us, clearly. Well, yeah, or else they'd have already shut it down. There's always going to be a hardcore fan base.
What, they'd have shut the game down already because there's no fans?
Well, if there was no one, literally 0 people playing the game, yeah, obviously. So
playing?
But that's what you just said.
I understand there's still people engaging with the game. I just mean fans. I mean, I haven't seen anybody online.
I've seen people on Twitter talking about like, I don't know what everyone's talking about. I love the game, so that's a fan of the game.
Clearly,
so there's going to be clearly more people out there that aren't on social media that love the game. I mean, so I think for actual, there might not be. I'm not saying there's tons of them, but I'm just saying for maybe a hardcore fan base, if hearing this news that the Austin team's taken over. Is probably a good thing because they'd made the Old Republic. You can speak to this, Luke. I know you played the game. It seems like the game improved a lot as well, didn't it?
It did, and I really did like it. If you are a fan of this game, it is a good move, but it just feels too late, doesn't it?
It does feel a bit late.
Too little, too late. They should have just listened to him from the start.
And if there is fans out there, in the cottages or in the hills or wherever they live. Can you just please leave a comment on the video just saying that you are a fan to prove me wrong?
They did on their old videos. Before this game came out, actually, I did see a lot of fans defending Anthem.
Yeah, but I doubt those fans will be defending it anymore. I mean, if they are, then they're still welcome to defend the game for whatever reason, then they've got to defend it, but
I will just say...
I just want to know if there's any fans. User research.
Perks did say that it was a Destiny clone and got a lot of slack for it. Or flack for it, and now
it's worse.
He's proven right.
It's worse. It's a Destiny clone gone wrong.
Yeah, it actually is. It's some kind of test tube baby that just didn't work out. It's crazy because when we did make that video, and this was before we even got our hands on the early access stuff. This was just when we were looking at the IGN exclusive footage that was being provided with the developer walkthroughs
before we got stuck in menus. Yeah.
Right, yeah. But before we weren't allowed to play. It was looking like pretty much Destiny and Mass Effect. It looked like it was going to be good, but nothing new. And then it actually, we got that hands on with it, and my God, it was so far away from those things. It was untrue. I mean, like I said to Matt before, if they would have actually cloned Destiny, they would have had an okay product. But the fact that I find it hard to believe that although Destiny was a taboo term in the offices, I find it hard to believe that they didn't actually look at it, because that, put yourself in their position. If I was one of those devs, I would be looking at it because I want to make a good product.
Yeah,
I don't just want to go in blind.
It seems though, even if they did look at it.
Yeah,
I was about to say that. Even if they did look at it, by what we read in the article, they were literally just ignored, and the people above were just like, no, just carry on. We're not going to do that. Just carry on what you're doing. Go down that same rabbit hole that you're going down.
It's quite funny though. Carry on, and the devs are like, carry on with what? I don't know
Like,
what
we
I'm
don't
meant to
know.
be doing.
Yeah.
I don't know what the game's about.
They were
seem
just
like that,
making
doesn't it?
environments and making things,
Like,
and
yeah,
it's
like
like,
creatures
what
and
is this
stuff, that was
for?
it.
Like, we don't even know. So that is the crazy thing, because they could have actually ended up launching in a really strong way if they gave up on the heart and soul of the game and said, kind of, this is more of the same, but in a different setting, and you can fly. People probably would have liked it. And I don't advocate them doing that, by the way, because that's the crappiest form of development. But it would have helped them. Like, they would have
at least
actually
it had been
got
some
away with it.
direction.
Right, and then Austin could have picked it up like they're doing now, and in a few months' time, because people would have stayed, they would have been bordering on a Destiny 1 launch, where it took a while, but it got there, and it had, by a fingernail, enough to keep people hanging on. Anthem doesn't do that.
No.
Anthem never had that. And I think it's absolutely crazy, because as we move forward and the devs start talking about in that sort of final stage of actual production rather than pre-production, they were aware of how bad it was. They were under no illusions. They raised the concerns that things were terrible, loading times were terrible, the screens were terrible. It had numerous bugs, and they knew they were there. But they said quite openly, we can't fix these because we don't have time. We have a schedule with hundreds more days of work that we don't have because of the deadline. We can't fix the bugs, so they have to stay. That's crazy.
I was going to say, it's like, it's like when you hand in an assignment and you know that it's rubbish, but it's like, I've got no time to fix it, so I've just got to hand it in anyway.
Yeah.
Just get something in. Just get something in.
Just get something in, but at least get it to a state where you'll pass. Don't fail it. Like, don't fail it so badly.
I suppose they could argue it's probably just about a pass, considering that the game actually came out. Well, I mean, you say that, but the thing is, the game's sold. I mean, it's not like it sold 2 copies. So
I think they wrote out the whole assignment.
Though.
Yeah, they wrote out the whole assignment in wingdings. No one could understand it.
Maybe.
I think it's completely betrayed
really?
People's trust in BioWare, though. People bought the game because of it being a BioWare product, I think.
Oh, they've lost all credibility in the name
exactly.
now. Let's be honest at this point. I mean, Mass Effect Andromeda, we were willing to give them benefit of the doubt on that because at least you could see there was some positive elements. But this is just, put another nail in their coffin.
Like the boots on the ground devs who worked on this from sort of day one and didn't end up crying in a cupboard or quitting because they couldn't take it anymore. I feel so sorry for them, because this isn't their fault. Anthem was not their fault as a collective. Anthem was the fault of the higher-ups who didn't give them direction, the lack of leadership, the constant change of the conception of what this game actually was. And there's a lot of people, because I've been guilty of this. I've sat there playing Anthem and said, God, BioWare are done. BioWare are finished. I don't mean that on the day-to-day devs. I mean that against the higher-ups. But unfortunately, others will suffer because of their incompetence.
Exactly. I mean, I couldn't put it any better myself. It does seem like that's what's going to happen. I mean, we should really as well mention now about BioWare's response to this. They put out a blog statement. We'll also attach that in the description below so you guys can get a read of it, but just some bits from it. They said, We chose not to comment or participate in this story because we felt there was an unfair focus on specific team members and leaders who did their absolute best to bring this totally new idea to fans. We put a lot of focus on better planning to avoid crunch time, and it was not a major topic of feedback in our internal post-mortems. Making games, especially new IPs, will always be one of the hardest entertainment challenges.
Yeah.
As suspected, generic and boring and just non-committal in every way, because they know that it's true.
But they didn't read the article. They didn't read this article. They just responded in terms of...
It's probably an automated response. I bet no one even typed it out.
Sorry, we're not at the office anymore. BioWare's long gone, but...
Doesn't really matter, mate. See you later. But that just shows you, I mean, they saw something that was potentially negative, because you can corner that from the title anyway. And they were like, nah, we don't want to read that. That could make us look bad. So, nah, we'll just send out this generic response. What a load of rubbish. Just like the game.
Definitely is.
That feels like Stone Cold. Yeah, Stone Cold needs to just come in and say that's the bottom line, to be honest, and the podcast needs to end.
Well, when I first saw this response, I've got to be honest, I was absolutely horrified by it, because it just shows how out of touch EA really are. EA and BioWare, I suppose you could put them both in that, because to actually say... The worst part of it for me was when they actually said that this sort of article shouldn't be sort of like published or talked about because it's like harmful and it's toxic. It's like, are you being serious? Come on.
You can't criticize our games.
Absolutely ridiculous.
These sort of leaks, these sort of leaks only come out when there's very good reason. A lot of these developers are bound to like really, punishing secrecy acts that they have to sign. And it's like, if it gets found out that they're leaking any information, they'll literally be sacked on the spot. Yeah. It's like, it's one of them things when these stories come out and these inside sources do actually get in touch with people like this, it's obviously for a very good reason, and they obviously feel very impassioned to speak about it because they're putting their entire career on the line doing it. Because if they get found out to have leaked information, not only are they going to lose their current job, no other developers are going to want to take them on either, because it's like, well, how can we trust you? So for stories like this to get leaked, it obviously takes a lot. For a lot of anger.
I don't blame him at all, though. Could you imagine if you're sat there, you've worked on a game, and everyone's criticizing it? It's just like, I did my best. I mean, look at the circumstances we were under.
If you were in from the beginning, you've potentially done 6 or 7 years on this.
Yeah.
And your work is reflected in garbage, even though your actual work may have been really good.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't blame them. I think, was it 19 people? Was it 19, I think, contributed to the article?
Yeah, it was quite a lot.
So we're not talking about one disgruntled whistleblower here. We're talking about quite a collective who've probably discussed this amongst themselves and kind of said, yeah, now is the time. Let's just take a stand against this garbage.
I think you could say, though, that we say about, they can't take much pride in their work, but I think the people that did the gameplay can take pride in their work, because they actually did a really good job. I think some of them, there might be other people there that might think, maybe I didn't do the best of jobs, but there's definitely the people that worked on the gameplay and things like that are definitely, they definitely, because by the sounds of it, that was in a rough state at first as well, but they definitely improved that a lot, and they got it to a good state in terms of the actual gameplay of the game anyway. Obviously the other stuff, no, they didn't, but I think sometimes we can be a little bit harsh sometimes, but I think those people definitely deserve a mention, to say kind of well done, because you did your job, really. You did your part.
You worked through hell.
You shouldn't get tarnished with the same brush as some other people there, I think.
The machine let them down big time.
Yeah,
it did. Exactly. What do we think then on BioWare's future? I know we've discussed this a lot, but this article obviously is a big period for him. Yeah, big moment. You think they're gone?
Yeah. Honestly, I can't see any way where EA would keep them. I can't envision any scenario where EA would keep them. I mean, they might leave EA and reform, and another publisher might take them on, but their stock has just fallen so dramatically, and it's also coincided with the stock of EA falling so dramatically as well. I can't see any situation where EA keeps them on.
Well, the situation is that Casey Hudson's actually still there and heading
he's come back.
Dragon Age 4, so that should tell you that they're at least going to give them one more game.
But will they
depending
though?
how well-
I know EA are just very.
No, I mean, yeah, maybe a couple of years down the line, it'll be like Dragon Age is cancelled. That could easily happen.
Yeah,
But as
Patrick
it's looking
Soderlund
like-
will come in again and say, "I don't like this," and I'll just be like, "Get rid of him."
I don't like this. What's
Get
this?
flying.
Dragons
flying in Dragon
a Dragon Age game. No, get this out.
Give him a
Where's the
suit.
Where's the microtransactions? Battle Royale? Where's Battle Royale? Come on,
The
guys!
dragon swoops in and gives you all
Dragon
the loot.
Age. This is the perfect opportunity to introduce 100-player online battles. Battle Royale. That's exactly what you need in Dragon Age.
But I think, yeah, a wider point about BioWare, if they're not already doomed, which is a possibility, I hope not, then Dragon Age 4 really is the sort of the last throw of the dice, isn't it, really, from BioWare? I think if that flops and doesn't sell well and doesn't captivate a new audience or an existing audience, then yeah, I'm not saying that this, like Matty said, maybe they could leave. Maybe there's some contract there where they could actually get out of it rather than actually be shut down. But we know what EA have done before. Look at Visceral. They made fantastic Dead Space games. Well, the first two anyway, and then the third one sort of had similar problems to Andromeda, didn't it? The third one, a little bit of mismanagement there, shoehorning in the co-op, things like that. People didn't like it as much.
Worth
They were
mentioning,
gone.
they were forced to do that.
Yeah, they were forced to do that.
That wasn't
by
a
EA.
purely development decision. So
No, they didn't want to do that. I think they wanted to make a traditional Dead Space game like 1 and 2. But that's the problem. And the BioWare, it's the same situation here where Mass Effect Trilogy, fantastic. First Dragon Age, really good. Second one, maybe not so good, but people still liked it. Even Dragon Age Inquisition, people really liked. And then
Got Game
Mass
of the
Effect
Year,
Andromeda
didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
Yep.
Very poor year, to be fair, has to be said. 2014 was an awful year for games. But that was one of the standouts of the year. But, and then Andromeda comes along and shakes everything up again. And it's the same situation as Visceral, where you just look at it now and go, how many more games can go like this before it's bye-bye time, I suppose?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Like, how many more do you get? Because these aren't small projects.
no, these are massive. These are
big.
AAA budgets.
Exactly.
You cannot afford indie type returns from them in the long run. Sure, they're going to have a great sales figure that relates to the month of February for Anthem because that's when the game launched.
Mm-hmm.
After that, it can't just fall off a cliff and never do well again. So if I had to predict the future for BioWare, I think we will see a Dragon Age 4. I don't know if we'll see that independently or in conjunction with EA. I'm not sure how it will come about. But we will see Dragon Age 4. But if it fails, then that is the final nail in the coffin as far as I'm concerned.
There is one last thing we should mention as well. I guess this is the end of the BioWare magic. Magic is a word that they were using.
They use that
basically.
so much.
Yeah.
They used it so
BioWare
much in that
magic.
article.
Yep.
It almost became nauseating, the amount of times they used it. And we all love BioWare, don't get me wrong, and they did used to have a certain element of magic, but I've not seen that magic for
you know
4 or
what?
5
I
years
think
now.
when I saw that, I just think that maybe that's part of the problem, that they overrate themselves as a developer, because they've had some good ideas and they've had some massive successes. Mass Effect 2 is one of my favorite games of all time, but it's like they don't consistently hit those top scores like some of the massive developers do. Like, they are a great developer, but they're not on the top level. And if they're walking around the office saying we've got the BioWare magic, it's just absolutely embarrassing. Just get on with making the game and shut up.
I think as well during this time period they lost a lot of people who had been at BioWare for over 10 years. And that magic I think left with them, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, that always pertained to the closing periods, didn't it? BioWare magic. It was basically a term that they used when it wasn't going well. They were running out of time. Don't worry, the BioWare magic will kick in. That's a fancy
And by
way of
BioWare
saying
magic,
we'll
they
get
meant
lucky.
yeah. No, by BioWare magic, what they meant is exploiting their staff to work 24 hours straight a day.
But even then,
This sounds like
terrible returns.
This sounds like me in uni. The loot magic. Do all my assignments the night before, and I'll be all right. And I was. But
That's classic.
That magic runs out.
Yeah, eventually.
In certain situations.
Like our time in this podcast.
Yeah, probably is a good time to end it because we have spoke about this for a while now, and we have spoke about Anthem for
Way too long.
An
Too
eternity.
long.
Too
And let's
long.
hope it's never again
Beyond.
after this.
Beyond, yep. Pardon that pun there. Anyway, that's our thoughts on the article in Anthem and its timeline and development hell, basically. But before we go, remember to subscribe for more gaming content each week. Give our video a like and comment below with your opinions on Anthem and their dev hell, like I said. You can also follow Checkpoint Reach Podcast on social media, on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at ChetReachPod. Links will be in the description below. And you can also follow us guys on social media. Where can people find you, Sud?
You can find me on Twitter at David10Spud.
Lovely stuff. How about you, Perks?
I'm at JG Perks.
Cool. How about you, Matty?
At Matty Cheatham on Twitter and Instagram.
Nice stuff. And you can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Leld, LEL3Ds, add a 9 on the end for Instagram. Anyway, thanks for joining me as ever, guys. Hopefully that'll be the last chat about Anthem for a while. Have a good week, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.